Three, two, one. Hey, this is World Series champion Matt Williams, and you're listening to Jim on Base.
Welcome to the Jim on Base podcast. My name is Jim Stevens, and this is the podcast that catches you up with some of your favorite athletes and other entertainment figures. For today's very special guest, we have on a World Series champion. He was a 5-time All-Star. He has 4 Gold Gloves and Silver Slugger awards. He was also the 2014 Manager of the Year. He has quite the intro. Please welcome the great Matt Williams. Matt, how are you?
Good. How's it going?
Yeah, it's going good, and glad to have you on. And I think you said you were working out earlier, right?
Yeah, I was at the gym trying to keep the experienced body in shape. You know, it gets harder and harder by the day, but got to keep doing it, man. Got responsibilities and batting practice to throw and fungos to hit. So making sure that I'm ready.
Yeah, well, I was wondering, what kind of workouts do you do? Are you like at a regular gym, or do you do CrossFit type stuff?
Well, I do. I've kind of had to modify a little bit. Last spring, I had a full hip replacement on my right hip. So,
oh wow.
So I've got to modify. I can't run as much as I used to, but there's ways to get around it. So today was a hour bike spin class, and then a lift afterward, and steam room and sauna, and that's my workout for the day. So it was good.
Nice.
Yeah.
Now, are you like a music guy? Do you crank the headphones, or how do you do it?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I don't like to talk to people in the gym for some reason.
I'm the same way.
Yeah, so I just put the earbuds in and go to work and try to get it done as quickly as possible, so I can move on to other things that are more enjoyable. But yeah, it's good for you.
Well, it's kind of neat that you're still into it, because, as you know, some guys get away from the game and maybe let themselves go a little bit, but you're still looking good. I wouldn't want to mess with you because you look like Mr. Clean, you know?
Well, I have those responsibilities, right? Yeah. So, you get into the winter and it can get away from you very easily. And, I got to start hitting fungos day one of spring training. So, make sure that I'm prepared for sure.
Well, one of your nicknames is the Big Marine, and I was a little disappointed because I went to see Top Gun and you weren't in it. I thought you'd have a part.
Yeah, Tom didn't call me. I don't know why.
Okay.
I thought he would call me for the last one too. At that point, I was very young, but yeah, no call yet. Maybe the next one. If they do number 3, maybe I'll be able to get a cameo or something.
There we go. Well, when you think of the off season, the season's such a long grind, and you're coaching for the Padres now. What do you think about when it comes to the off season? Are you thinking about just lying low, or do you like to go on a vacation, or how do you kind of spend your off season?
Well, I like to get out and about. Traveling is really difficult when you're away for so long during the season because you need to catch up. I've got 4 kids that I need to see. So that time is for catch-up time and to try to heal the body if you can. It's like as a third base coach, it's the closest thing that you can get to playing. So my demands are I've got to be physically ready and mentally ready every day. So it's nice to just unplug, get away from folks. So I've had opportunity to do that. My brother is a caretaker of a ranch in Northern Cal, in Geyserville. So I frequent the ranch for that, that mental break and get back to nature and do some fishing. And so that's fun. And so, winters are to unplug and to make sure that you're doing the other things in your life that are really important as well. So, and then it gets to the point where you've got to get back in baseball mode. And that comes very quickly, especially, right after Christmas, it's go time again to get prepared for spring training.
Well, I think you have some younger kids too, right? So what do you guys like to do together?
Well, actually, I've got my 4 are 32, 31, 30, and soon to be 19. So, they're all kind of out doing their own, living their lives and doing their things. But it's difficult because they're working and doing what they do. Mm-hmm. And the schedule, the baseball schedule is not conducive to seeing people very often. So it's the time to get together and have family time and catch up and make sure that I'm present for them too. So it's fun.
Yeah. Where are you guys spending the holidays? Do they come to you or do you go to them?
This year, actually, we're going to Boise, Idaho. My son, who's my second child, just got married last November. So We're going to head to Boise to his wife's folks live there, so we're all going to gather there and have a Christmas celebration there. So it'll be fun.
Yeah, it sounds great.
Yeah.
And you also have a birthday coming up. So do you have any fun plans for that?
Well, as you get to be experienced like I am, it's the birthdays don't become so important anymore. But yeah, I'll spend it up at the ranch, and good food and good people and good times, and hang out for a little bit. So it's a lot of fun.
Well, what do you go for? Do you do like the vanilla frosting or chocolate? Like, what's kind of your go-to?
I'm not a huge chocolate guy, so if I have anything, it's vanilla frosting on vanilla cake, or I can do German chocolate. Either one's fine by me. My favorite though is key lime pie. So if we have opportunity to have key lime pie, then I'm all in.
Okay. Have you ever done the cherry chip?
No.
That's actually really good.
Is it?
And you can do vanilla on vanilla. Yeah, one of my favorites.
Might have to try that.
Yeah.
Thanks for the tip, pal. Appreciate it.
You've mentioned the ranch a couple of times, so I'm just trying to picture you. Do you put the cowboy hat on, or what do you do?
Yeah, it's not a working cattle ranch or anything like that. It's just a private ownership out of the Bay Area, and but yeah, there's fishing available, bass fishing, turkeys and pigs and deer and all kinds of animals up there. So it's nice to just sit on the back porch and hang out and let the sun hit your face a little bit. It's fun.
It's like you're on your own set of Yellowstone, you know?
I know it. Yeah, it feels like it. Yeah. Quads and rangers and all kinds of things to get around with. So
yeah,
it's great. It's early mornings and early evenings, up at 4:30 or 5, and watch the sun come up, and then in bed by 9. So a little bit different than the baseball routine, but I enjoy it. Yeah.
Well, you were born in Bishop, California.
Yeah.
Yeah, it looks like that's near the Nevada border. So what's that area like?
It's the eastern slope of the Sierras. So Bishop is really close to Mammoth Mountain, the ski resort, just up the hill. So, it's kind of high desert. It's you've got everything you could possibly want, from lakes to mountains to desert to whatever your heart desires in that area. So it was fun to grow up there. Population, I actually lived in Big Pine, which is 15 miles south of Bishop, and population 900.
Wow.
Really small town. And, if you're walking down the street, somebody picks you up and they know exactly where you live, and they give you a ride home. So it was a great place to grow up.
Yeah. Did you have brothers and sisters, or were you the only child?
I'm the youngest of 5, all boys. So I was the one that got tormented from time to time. I was also the one that got spoiled because I was the youngest. So actually, my brother that owns the ranch, he's my oldest brother. So I just turned 70 last week, and he's enjoying his life on the ranch. A lot of fun.
What did your parents do for work?
My dad was a master carpenter for his whole life. Built everything from hospitals to custom homes to finish work. And then my mom was a police officer.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, she was the only female officer in Inyo County, which is the county that surrounds Bishop and that area. So yeah, she was a pioneer, if you will. Back in those days, there were very few female officers.
Yeah. What did you want to do then when you grew up? Did you want to be a police officer, or did you have any backup plans?
No, there was no backup plan. It was from the time I was 6 years old. It was I wanted to be a baseball player and didn't think about anything else other than that. Just that's all I wanted to be. And I'm one of the fortunate ones that got a chance to live my dream. And I still get to today. It's a different arena being a coach, but I still get to go stand out there in front of 50,000 people every day and do what I love. So it's really enjoyable.
Well, and when you grew up in that area, who were your favorite teams and maybe some players that you looked up to?
Well, I didn't really have, back in those days, it's a completely different world as compared to today. We got one game per week, and that was on Saturday. That was the game of the week. Being in Central California, we got the Dodger games a lot. But I didn't really have favorite players. All I wanted to be, was my brothers. I just wanted to be as good as them. They were all athletes. They all played football, baseball, basketball, the town was so small that, they couldn't field enough players to play 11-man football. So they played 8-man football. But I just wanted to be them because they were my idols at that point. They're 9, 11, and 13 years older than I am. So by the time I was able to recognize what they were doing, they were high school players and pretty good ones too. So I just wanted to be them.
Well, one thing I thought was interesting too was your grandpa, right? Bert Griffith. He had some major league experience. Is that your mom's dad or?
That's my mom's. That's a grandpa on my mom's side. Yeah, he played professionally for a few years. Played with Washington Senators, the St. Louis Browns at the time. He was on the last team that won a world championship in D.C. He was on 1922. I think it was 22 or 24. The Senators won the World Series, and that was the last team that actually won a championship. So he was a member of that team.
Wow.
Yeah.
Did you have a relationship with him at all, or?
He was, yeah, I was really young when he passed, but I got a chance to know him a little bit. And I don't know what it is or why it is, but for some reason I got that gene that, pulls you toward the diamond. So, yeah, it's very cool that he was, a major leaguer, and I can look back today and find pictures of him and information on him. And so, yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Because you have that great, well-known from baseball fans, that Babe Ruth impression running around the bases.
Yeah.
Did your grandpa play against the Babe at all, or?
He played, yeah. My mom actually had pictures. In the early 20s, there was a tour that major leaguers took to Japan and South Korea. And he was on that tour. So I've got pictures of him, Babe Ruth, Casey Stengel, a number of players on the back of a ship. They had to do it by ship back then. So on a ship on their way to Tokyo. And so, yeah, they're really, really cool pictures. Standing there when they're trench coats and top hats and cigars. And yeah, it's fun to look at.
Well, that's pretty neat. You sound well-versed, because some guys play professionally and don't always know the history, but it sounds like you kind of know a little bit of the history of baseball.
Well, yeah, you want to be a student of the game, right? And understand who came before you and understand the players of today. And, as a coach, I've got to try to understand that so I can relate to these guys and make sure I'm doing the best job I can as their coach. So to understand the history of the game is important, and also not, be so stuck that you're not flexible enough to understand the guys of today. It's a completely different game, even from when I played, let alone, back in the history. So it's important to know all that.
Yeah. Well, when you were in high school and maybe kind of finding out who you are as a person, also as an athlete, what were you listening to? Were you a glam rock guy, or what was kind of your music?
No, I was a Journey, Foreigner, 38 Special rock guy. I would cruise around in my hand-me-down Mustang, beat-up Mustang from my brother, and at that point, throw the cassette tape in. It seems so long ago. It's not that long ago, actually, but it seems so long ago that I would put the cassette tape in my cassette player in my car and crank it and roll the windows down and cruise down the boulevard. It only took about 2 minutes to get from one point in the northernmost part of the town to the southernmost part. But yeah, cruising Main Street, and yeah, I thought I was cool. Turns out I wasn't very cool, but.
Well, it sounds like you were a two-sport guy too, right? You were the high school quarterback?
I was, yeah. Yeah. At that point, when I got to high school, we moved to Carson City, Nevada. And so, with the weather there, in the fall, it's football season. So I played football, and then the snow came, and you had to play basketball. And then you wait till the snow gets off the diamond to spend the spring and summer playing the sport that I ultimately love. But yeah, played them all. I think in today's world, it's difficult because there's opportunity, especially in warm weather states, for young players to play one sport and do it all year long. But I think for me, it was really important to experience all the sports because they teach you something different, each one of them. So maybe a better athlete, I think, playing all those sports.
Yeah. Well, my first question was, I was able to have Warren Moon on the show, so I was wondering, how was your spiral?
It was okay. It was all right. I didn't have an opportunity to get a chance to go play college football. I actually had one opportunity. I went on a recruiting trip to USC, and I was the quarterback on our team, but I was also the punter. So I was asked that if I did go to USC to play baseball, that they asked me to walk on and try out to be the punter. So I never went, but that would have been interesting, play USC football.
Yeah.
Never happened. Never got to that point.
Well, you were drafted right out of Carson City, like you had said, in 1983 by the Mets in the 27th round, but didn't sign.
Yeah.
So was college always the priority, or what made you stick to your guns?
Yeah, it was. I had opportunity to go and sign with the Mets initially, but I looked at it honestly and thought, I'm not ready for this. I'm not ready to go. I was a young graduate anyway. My mom started me in kindergarten at the age of 4. So, my graduation I was 17 years old. So I wasn't really ready. Wasn't mature enough to go do that and be out on my own yet. So I decided to go to college and grow a little bit. So, the example is I'm a little bit of a late bloomer. So I left high school at 6'2" and 168 pounds. And then 3 years later, I left college at 6'2" and 210 pounds and stronger. And so, and then I was, for the baseball grind, I was more prepared at that point and got an education at the same time. So it was a good decision to go to college.
Yeah. Did you get a degree then?
No, I never finished. At that point, I got drafted as a junior and went on to play and always had, designs on going back to finish. But the baseball world got me, and I just, I've stayed in it ever since, and going on 40 years now.
Wow. Well, what was your major?
I'm a communications major, a broadcasting major.
Oh, nice.
So I did a little bit of that in the interim in between jobs, or, right after I retired from playing, I did some broadcast work and some local stuff in Phoenix for the Diamondbacks, and did some Giants telecasts as well. So the pre and post stuff in studio.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. You seemed kind of like a natural at it.
Well, my job's easy. The color guy's job is easy. You just explain, the play-by-play guy tells everybody what's going on, and then the color guy just explains why. And, from a baseball perspective, it's easy to explain, why they got the hit or why they didn't, or why they made the play or didn't. So it was fun. But ultimately, I love to coach and I love to be on the field. So I got back to that.
Well, it seems like going to college really paid off, because you went from 27th round, right, to becoming a third pick in 1986 by the Giants.
Right. Yeah, it was the best decision I could have made. Freshman and sophomore year, I didn't know whether I'd ever get another chance. But I think the pivotal day for me was I went to UNLV and we were playing UNR in Reno. And Al Rosen, who was the GM at the time, came over to Reno to watch the game. And I happened to hit a long homer to left field, and he got up and left. And then about 2 weeks later, I got the call that they were going to draft me first round for them and number 3 overall. So I must have made an impression on Al. So that's good.
Well, would you say you kind of got fast-tracked to the big leagues as well? Because you were drafted in 86, and then you made your MLB debut in April of 1987 as a 21-year-old.
Yeah, it was quick. I got drafted summer in June, of 86, signed, and then finished the rest of the season, that particular season, in Clinton, Iowa at the low A level. As part of my signing bonus, I got a chance to go to Major League Spring Training the following year in Scottsdale. So when that happened, Chris Brown was the third baseman at the time, and he hurt himself in spring training. So I got a chance to play every day. Roger Craig put me in the lineup every single day. And so I got a real fast education on Major League Spring Training anyway. And then they sent me down the final day of spring training as they were leaving to come back up to San Francisco. So I thought, well, that's awesome. What a great experience. And so they sent me to AAA. So I completely skipped AA. They sent me to the AAA level, and I played the first night in Phoenix for the Firebirds, and got a call after that game that I was going to Dodger Stadium the next day. So 72 games in single A, 1 game in AAA, and I found myself in Dodger Stadium starting at shortstop. So, a tad overwhelmed at that point, but nonetheless, I made it pretty fast. So yeah, it was good.
What was that experience like going down to Dodger Stadium, your debut? I mean, I imagine you were nervous. Like, what do you think about when you reflect on that?
Well, we got Oral Hershiser that particular day. Jose Uribe had the night before had pulled a hamstring trying to score. So, I was the next guy in line.
Mm.
So they called me up, and I found myself standing out there, as Tommy would refer to it, as blue heaven. And I was completely over my skis, out of control, over my skis, not knowing which way to turn, all of those things. But then, that year I got to play 80 I think it was 84 games or something like that at the major league level. So good experience. Roger and Al and all the coaching staff were really patient with me, and let me play and taught me how to do it. So I was one of the fortunate guys that got that education and had some patience along with it from the coaching staff and the front office. So made me a better player for sure.
Well, you went 1 for 3 against the Dodgers. So
Yeah.
that debut, do you still have the hit, or do you have like a little display room?
Yeah, I've got the ball. I have the ball the original ball. It was, a hard hit 17 hopper back through the middle, but they're hard to come by. So you take them any way you can get them. That's for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was 1 for 3 off of Oral that day. And then the next day we got Fernando Valenzuela, and it was a little bit different story the following day. So
You can't catch a break.
I know. It's two of the most difficult pitchers to hit at that time, my first 2 days. But hey, if you're going to do it, you're going to have to face those guys anyway, right?
That's true.
So yeah, it was fun.
You mentioned playing for Roger Craig, the Hum Baby. Is it kind of weird now to think that you were probably around his age now when he was managing you? Because he always had such the old-looking face,
Yeah. He was the grandfather, influence on everybody, right? Him and Bob Lillis. Remember Bob Lillis?
Yeah.
He was the infield guy. Norm Sherry. They had an older coaching staff with a bunch of young kids. I was kind of the second wave that came behind Will and Robbie. Robbie Thompson. So they were second year players at that time. So we had a very young team and very talented team, but it took those elder coaches to have patience enough to let us learn at that level. So
yeah.
And again, it was fun, and it was challenging and frustrating, and all of those things combined. But we learned, and we turned out to be pretty decent players.
Yeah, you mentioned a few guys there. You had some good vets on that team, guys like Bob Brenly, Kevin Mitchell, Will Clark, Mike Krukow. Like, how did they kind of handle you coming up as a young guy? Did they take you under their wing, or?
Oh yeah, so they made sure that I was, that I had everything I needed. And then, I gravitated toward Will and Robbie because they were more my age. But the veterans took care of the young guys, whether it was taking them out to buy them dinner or making sure that they had the right suit or whatever it was. So they taught us how to be professional and how to be major leaguers. And I think to a man, we took that forward with us and tried to emulate that as we, went further into our careers. And there's always this new crop of rookies that are coming, right? So to teach them how to be good teammates and how to handle themselves and what they need to do for the next wave behind them is really important. And we learned that from all those veteran guys.
Yeah, it's kind of neat to hear you talk about that, being the young guy, because I had on Rich Aurelio over the summer, and he had mentioned how you then were the veteran that took him out to lunch and said, hey, we got your back, we'll be there for you. Just, be professional and show up for the game. Yeah,
be on time, make sure that you're prepared. But that's what I learned from the previous group, and you need to pass that along. But it's an interesting dynamic because not all teams have that, but we were taught by a group of veterans that knew exactly what to do and how to go about winning a baseball game, and also being a good teammate and making sure that you've got support from your teammates and you give them support as well. So Kruk and Chris Spire and Don Robinson and Big Daddy and all those guys taught us how to do that. So pretty good education.
Yeah, and it was a good team, too. You guys won 90 games and made the NLCS against the Cardinals, right?
Yeah, unfortunately didn't get any further than that. But, Yeah, I mean, it was a good team, great mix. Chili Davis was in center, and Hackman was there, and so it was good veterans, good younger guys, bring some energy, and make some mistakes along the way too. But yeah, it was a good mix.
What was it like a few years later? I know he was your hitting coach for a while, but then when Dusty Baker took over.
Yeah. So Dusty, that's of course the first step in his great path that kind of culminated this year with the World Championship. But
yeah,
he's the one that taught me how to hit initially. So I can remember long days in the cage and in the tunnel in the underground of Olympic Stadium in Montreal, and those types of experiences that you just can't find. You just don't find them. And so he taught me how to hit. He taught me how to be a professional hitter. Again, 72 games of A-ball, and I find myself at the major league level and trying to figure it all out. But he's the one that taught me how to hit, and then ultimately he became the manager. And we've been friends for a very, very long time.
Have you been able to talk to him or text him yet about getting his ring?
Oh yeah, he's excited. Now in true Dusty form, he's hey, thanks man, but now we got to go get another one. So he's completely focused on 2023 and trying to repeat. Certainly first ballot guy, and I'm very proud of him and happy for him.
Yeah, I was rooting for him, so that was great to see. And I was curious, where did you live when you played on the Giants? Were you in the city, or were you like in Foster City?
Yeah, I was. So really, nobody lived in the city at that point. The only reason that we would go there would be to go to dinner or whatever, because a Candlestick is south of the city, so everybody was south. Foster City, Redwood City. So yeah, I lived all over the South Bay. The longer I stayed, the better accommodations, of course, because you get paid a little bit more money. But yeah, it was all over the South Bay for those 10 years.
Okay. And one thing I've always been curious about, the 94 season that was cut short by the strike, obviously you had 43 home runs, and you were on pace to possibly break Roger Maris's 61 home runs. Do you ever kind of wonder about that? Like, what if the season was able to be complete? Especially with the whole Aaron Judge thing happening. Right. It made me think about it a little bit. And how was seeing that happen from your vantage point?
I enjoyed it just like everybody else. I'm a fan just like everybody else, watching him, get to the point where he could actually break the record. But in my case, it was one of those years where it just seemed like if I drove a ball, it would just sneak over the fence. It was one of those years that every time we went to Wrigley, every game we played at Wrigley, the wind was blowing out. Mm. It was also one of those years where it wasn't like I was tearing the world up. There was a lot of 1-for-4s with a solo homer. So the batting average wasn't great. The RBI total wasn't great, but I had opportunity, potentially to get to. We stopped the season at 112 games, and I had 50 games left to hit 19 more. So it was possible, and at that time there wasn't a whole lot of pressure either, because the stories were about the impending strike. And yeah, there was a few, I would answer some questions about, do you think you'll ever get there? Could you get there if the strike doesn't happen? So, but it wasn't, all this media pressure and attention on the home run total necessarily, because, there was a bigger issue at hand. So, for me, it was fortunate that it was that way, because I didn't have to go through, what Aaron went through this year. Mm-hmm. Or, the back in the day when McGuire and Sosa or Barry, for that matter.
Yeah.
It was the questions about the home runs every single day. So we didn't have that at that point, because it was all about the strike. It was all about the work stoppage at that point. So a little easier to handle, for sure.
Because I've always wondered, guys had always said, I don't read the newspaper, that kind of thing. Did you ever let it get in your head at all?
No, because there really wasn't a focus on it. So, and for me, honestly, if I was to look back at it, there was one guy on our team that would probably have overtaken me anyway. People forget that I think Barry had 38 at the time. So, and he was coming hard. So, it's like, he's you're going to hit more homers than me anyway. So what does it matter? But yeah, there wasn't a whole lot of pressure.
Well, another interesting moment in Giants history, too. In November of '96, you were traded to the Cleveland Indians,
Yeah.
a multiple-player deal that brought Jeff Kent into the Giants, and that caused a lot of anger with Giants fans, especially at Brian Sabean. What was that whole experience like for you?
Well, I was home. I got home after the season, and I got a call from Brian letting me know that they'd made the trade. And the way that, at that time, I really didn't understand it. In subsequent years, I came to understand a little more of the dynamic about, why and what they had to do. So, at that point, we didn't know whether we were going to stay in San Francisco. There was rumors that we were going to go to Tampa, and, they were going to sell the team. And then they made the decision to keep the team in San Francisco and had a new ownership group come in. And then they had to make a choice. They had to make a choice on, the two highest priced players. They had to part with one of them. Again, if these people are not stupid. So if they had to make that choice, do you trade Bonds or do you trade Williams? You probably trade Williams, So they had to do it. And as it turns out, Sabes made a great deal to get Jeff back here at a much cheaper price, not knowing that he would go on to be the great player that he was, because when he was there, he was kind of a extra player, played all over the diamond. But when he got to San Francisco, they plugged him right in at second base, and he had virtually a Hall of Fame career. So it was a great trade. I understand that people were upset, and I voiced my opinion, of course, that I would have preferred to stay in San Francisco for my whole career. But that's the business of baseball, man. It happens. So then not much you can do about it. As it turned out, I got traded to Cleveland, and in the winter of '96 and '97, we went to the World Series. We got beat, but played on a great team. And then after that season, went to the expansion team in Arizona, and ultimately won a championship there. So I think it worked out for both sides. Initially, it was a little bit of a shock and some angst. But as I continued through my career, I began to understand why and why they had to do it and why they did do it, and it was a great trade for both sides.
And you spoke about that great team, the Indians. I had Brian Giles on, and It sounds like him, Sean Casey, David Justice. You had some characters on that team.
Yeah, I mean, we had Jim Thome played first, and we Justice in left along with Giles, Manny Ramirez in right, Grissom in center, Omar Vizquel at short, Sandy Alomar behind the plate. Yeah, we had it was a juggernaut of an offensive team, and
underrated, I'd say.
Yeah, I mean, some really good players and some guys that went on to have excellent careers, and so it was fun. We ultimately couldn't handle the Marlins at that point, but yeah, I mean, it's one of those years that you make it to the World Series. It's pretty gratifying. You want to win it, but just to get there is gratifying in and of itself.
Yeah. And you mentioned going to the Diamondbacks. That must have been really a fun experience, their first season as a franchise. And I heard that you had requested a trade there to be closer with your kids, right? So
yeah.
How would you describe having kids affecting like a professional player's career?
Well, at that point, during the '97 season, I had gone through a divorce. So the only way that I was going to be able to be next to my kids was to get to Arizona. That's where they were. They're entrenched in, they were very young at that point, but they were entrenched in their community, their friends, their just starting school and all of that stuff. So I just requested a trade, and John Hart and Dan O'Dowd, who were in charge in Cleveland, honored that. And, I got a chance to get to the expansion team. So, and it was fun. The first year was a little rough because, just trying to figure it all out. Buck Showalter was the manager. And we got a chance to get our feet wet in that regard. And then, we got Randy Johnson, then we got Kurt Schillen, then we got Luis Gonzalez and Mark Grace and Steve Finley. And they rounded the team out nicely and ended up, being the quickest franchise to win a world championship. It helps when you got those two guys at the front of the rotation, but but nonetheless, it was It was a great experience, and still the only professional team in the Phoenix area that's gotten that far. So it was fun to play. Yeah, we had a great time.
It's got to be key too, like going to the Diamondbacks, just knowing you don't have to face Randy Johnson.
Yeah, again, he was in the American League for so long. I didn't face him very much. The only time I faced him was when I was in Cleveland in the American League. But yeah, we'd rather have him on our team than anybody else's. That's for sure.
Yeah. Well, 2001 was such a magical year. It's still, for me, it's one of my favorite World Series to reflect on the way it ended. And you kind of had a picture-perfect moment. I think were you on deck and you welcomed in Jay Bell, right, when he scored the winning run?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a pretty cool moment.
Yeah, it was an interesting dynamic. We were this little team out of Arizona. 9/11 happened, and everybody in the U.S. was rooting for the Yankees. So we felt like the Yankees, like we were the evil empire. And so being the underdog, but yeah, we were able to pull through it, and had a lot of veteran guys that were, kind of toward the end of their career, and it was all about winning, and it worked out for us. So cherish those moments.
Yeah, it's interesting too because you went to the World Series once with each team, and I guess if you have to plan it out, it's probably better to win the last one than maybe the first one and lose the last two.
Yeah, it's interesting that I kind of got to experience everything. So, we we play the A's, the earthquake happens, and we got swept. Right, so that was really disappointing. Then I went to Cleveland on a completely different team, and then we played extra innings of Game 7. And lost. And so that was disappointing. And then Arizona, of course, we get to Game 7. We're down by a run in the eighth, and Mariano Rivera's in, and we were able to score and eventually win on Gonzo's hit. So opposite ends of the spectrum within that World Series component. Interesting times to play for sure.
Yeah. Well, it makes me wonder also, too, when you ended up retiring, what's your relationship like with Will Clark? Because I think, didn't you both kind of have jobs with the Diamondbacks, maybe in the front office at the same time? Or
Yeah, Will actually came and did a little bit of stuff with the hitters, and had some time in the front office as well. I started coaching a little bit later than that, but I was actually at that point an owner. I was part of the ownership group in Arizona, and so yeah, we got a chance to interact on a daily basis. But I think he's ultimately back where he belongs. He belongs in Giants uniform and with the organization. And I was so happy that last summer he got a chance to get his number retired, and so he deserved it.
I was there. That was a special day.
Yeah, it's pretty special. Yeah. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to be there because we were playing, but I saw the highlights of the speech and everything. It was fantastic.
Yeah, it was a great day. And, you talk about Will Clark, Kevin Mitchell, Luis Gonzalez, Manny Ramirez. These guys all seem to have kind of career years, not only with you in the lineup, but a lot of the time you were protecting them by batting behind them.
Yeah.
So, two-part question. Did you or did they become better hitters by maybe watching one another? And the second part, is there any extra responsibility to be the guy who protects the other star in the lineup?
Well, back in those days, we all feel like dinosaurs at this point, given all the analytics and all the information today. But back in those days, it was all about watching the game, when you're not at bat, and understanding what that opposing pitcher is going to try to do to get you out. So they all studied a lot, within the game. Not necessarily looking at numbers, but watching and understanding what they can and can't do, and so they made themselves great hitters. They made themselves very good ball players, and I was kind of the fortunate one. So I was if I was to look at it and be honest with myself, I was the slugger that would stand behind them and make the opposing manager make a choice. If they've got a choice, if there's runners on second and third and Barry Bonds steps to the plate, they're probably not going to pitch to him. So I was the guy that they pitched to, which was fun. And, I relished the opportunity in that regard to have them walk Barry or walk Will or walk Mitch or walk gonzo to get to me. And, sometimes I came through, sometimes I didn't, but it seemed as if my enjoyment of the game was always the best at that point because, I just got guys standing on the bases all the time. So that's kind of fun, It's kind of fun to be in that situation. It's not so fun when you don't come through, but those times you do means a great deal for your team. So I was the fortunate guy that got to be behind the intentional walk and see what I could do.
Switching over to defense now, it's called the hot corner, as you know. What field did you maybe not look forward to playing on due to like fielding conditions?
Well, there was a couple. My favorite place to play outside of Candlestick was Wrigley Field.
Okay.
Because I saw the ball really well there offensively. Defensively, it was a challenge.
It's a quick infield, right?
It's actually, well, it's mostly day games, and the fans sit right behind the hitter. There's no barrier, so it's difficult to see, and the surface wasn't great. It was, it's the same. They've redone it now, but at that point, it was the same field that they had played on for 80 years or whatever it was. So it was a little, had some potholes and, so fielding was not easy on that diamond. So that was one. The old parks, got a chance to play at Old Tiger Stadium, and that was a little rough. Boston, Fenway was a little rough at the time, but that it was such huge tradition there that they didn't want to change things because it was I got a chance to sit on the same bench that Babe Ruth sat on. It was the exact same bench. So there's something to be said for that. But great places to hit, not so great to field.
Well, who was a right-handed hitter that maybe you feared playing in on?
Well, there's a couple. The one there's two guys that are that are more recent guys that really gave me troubles. Craig Biggio. So you had to play him to bunt, right? Because he was really fast. But his best attribute was getting the head out and pulling the baseball. And kind of in the same mold, Ron Gant with the Braves. So yeah, they both hit the ball extremely hard, but you had to play them in because they would bunt. But intimidating guys, Jack Clark.
Oh, the Ripper.
The Ripper was a huge man, right? 6'5", 6'6", and 250 pounds, and had one intention when he stepped to the plate, and that was to hit it over the bleachers in left field. So you knew it was coming at you, and just tried to see it as best you could and pick a hop and hopefully secure it in the glove, if not off the body, and pick it up and try to throw him out. But yeah, Dave Winfield and Andre Dawson were no fun. That was no fun when they came to the plate, because if they got out in front of a baseball that was coming at you at a pretty good pace. So I just tried to make sure that I protected the body as much as I could. And if it got by me, then, Barry or Kevin or one of those guys would pick it up in left field and throw it in. But yeah, those guys were no fun to play against at the corner. Some pretty powerful guys.
Well, what was it like when you got out of baseball and eventually you came back, you coached for the Diamondbacks, the A's, and then eventually became the manager for the Nationals? So how was that for you? Did it seem like overwhelming? I mean, you had a lot of success, especially in 2014.
Well, initially I thought to myself, I'm not gonna go coach. I don't want to do that. So I spent some time away, did some broadcast work, did some front office work. And none of it, did some other things outside of baseball, but nothing ever compared to being on the field for me. So, at a certain point, I just said, okay, enough of this. I've got to get back to what I love to do. So I started going to spring training with the Diamondbacks when Bob Melvin was the manager there. And he had his staff in place, but I'd go to spring training and work with the infielders. And then he left, and A.J. Hinch got the job. And A.J. is the one that gave me my first opportunity to coach. I started at first base and was the infield coach, and then eventually moved to third. And then, from there, eventually got a chance to go manage in D.C., which was a great experience. Being in charge and, and being the manager and all that comes with it is a fun experience. It's stressful at times, but it's fun nonetheless. And we got a chance to go to the playoffs there and had some great players there as well. So it's fun to see guys grow and to be part of it. So, and again, I haven't quit since. So, and I don't plan to anytime soon.
Well, one thing I've always wondered too, especially when you're the main guy, when you're the manager, is it kind of fun to get thrown out of the game sometimes?
Yeah,
A little bit like
it depends. It depends. Generally, you're going to get thrown out of the game if one of your players gets thrown out.
Mm.
So that part of it's no fun because, you want your players to stay in the game as much as possible.
So then you're actually mad.
Yeah. Other times it's fun to get thrown out and, have everybody go nuts or whatever it is. But anymore, that really doesn't happen very much anymore with all the rule changes and all the replay. And, even back in as a few years ago as 2014 that was just the start of replay. So you don't have the Donnybrooks anymore between the manager and the umpire.
Yeah. Because I've always wondered, when you do get tossed and the game's ending and the guys start coming back in the clubhouse, do you still act mad, or do they kind of make light of what happened? Or
oh yeah,
what's that dynamic?
Yeah, they make light of it. Especially if you're out there kicking dirt or anything like that. They come back and peek their head in the office and laugh. But yeah, it depends. The majority of the time that a manager gets kicked out of a game, they're not really mad. There's some ulterior motive there, whether it's whether the team's hasn't been playing well, or you want to change attitude or whatever it is. But generally, there's a reason behind it. And that reason is, that you're just trying to, reverse momentum or something like that. So you act like you're mad, but you're not really mad.
So you went from managing the Nationals, and then you went over to South Korea for the Kia Tigers, right? So how did that all happen?
Well, I was with the A's, was with Bob in Oakland for 2 years. And I'm sitting in Los Angeles, and I get a call from, I'd met 4 or 5 years earlier. He's kind of an agent that takes players from either the U.S. or Latin players from their country, and he brokers deals with the South Korean base, with the KBO. And so I got a call from this guy, and he said, "Hey, where are you?" I said, "I'm in Los Angeles." And he said, "Okay, stay right there. Don't go anywhere. The Kia is going to fly in tomorrow from Seoul, and they want to talk to you." I said, "About what?" And he said, "I'm not exactly sure, but they're going to fly in. I'll call you back and let you know where they're going to be." So they flew in, and I met with them at a hotel down by LAX. And it turns out the guy that I met with, who was the GM, was on the Korean national team when I played on the USA team, and we played against each other. So he had an interpreter with him, and we sat down at a table for lunch. And he said, "I want you to come be the manager for the Kia Tigers." And I said, "Well, I have a job. I'm working with the A's, and I'm really comfortable where I'm at." And so he took a piece of paper, multiple pieces of paper out of his pocket, of his jacket, and laid it on the table and said, this is a 3-year contract, guaranteed contract, and we want you to come over there and manage the team. So I said, "Okay, well, can I think about this?" And he said, "Of course." And I said, "Okay, well, when are you guys going to go back to Seoul?" And he said, "Well, we're staying here until you sign this contract." I went, "Really?" And he said, "Yeah, we're not leaving until you sign the contract and go, or you say no, and we'll go try to find somebody else." So I went back, and I thought about it and talked to the family, talked to Bob, talked to Billy Bean, talked to everybody involved, and decided to go ahead and go do it. So I signed the contract, and a day later I'm on a flight to Seoul, and I was there for 2 years, 2 of the 3, and it was a great experience. It was COVID at the time, so it was difficult, but it's a interesting baseball dynamic over there. Mm-hmm. They have cheerleaders on the dugouts, and the fans are crazy, and it's loud, and they play music during the inning, and so it was a completely opposite end of the spectrum, but it was enjoyable. It was fun to go over there and experience that. And then Bob called and said, "Hey, I'm going to San Diego. You want to go? And I said, of course. So I left South Korea and came back and went to San Diego.
You guys must be pretty close then.
Yeah, we were teammates in 87 and 88 with the Giants. He was our bench coach on the World Series team in Arizona. And then I worked with him with the A's as well. And, we've got a really good working relationship, manager to third base coach. And so he's very comfortable, with me being on the staff. So he invited me to come to San Diego as well. So
awesome.
Yeah.
Well, one quick thing I did want to ask about being a third base coach. Why do they never stand in the box? I've always wondered that. Is it an angle thing, like a vantage point?
Yeah, it's exactly right. It's angles. It's understanding. So, if a runner's on first base and the ball goes past the first baseman, the runner is going to lose sight of the baseball. So the third base coach has to be down the left field line enough to know that when that runner looks over there, you've got to be in the right position to either hold him or wave him or any of that. And then when there's a runner on second base, you want to give yourself enough time to determine pace of ball hit, angle of outfielder, knowing the arm strength, knowing the speed of the runner, all of those things. So you find that the third base coach is closer to the plate with the runner on second base, so he can give himself some space and some time to make the right decision.
Gotcha, that makes sense.
Yeah, and the fans are always all over you about, get in the box, Williams. Well, I can't get in the box because I'll be out of position. So yeah, I mean, third base coaches are kind of all over the place, all over the diamond, trying to figure out, making those decisions properly and with some education and some timing. So yeah, that's why we're never in the box.
And one thing I wanted to ask really quickly about being in South Korea, when you are the manager and you're having to talk and communicate, that's such a big part of your job. How did you deal with the language barrier? Did you just have an interpreter always around you?
I had an interpreter that was with me, 24/7 if I needed. But the reality is that the Korean baseball players, there's no term, as an example, for base hit in the South Korean language. So they speak Konglish. It's a form of English and Korean at the same time. So all the baseball terms are English terms. So on the field, it's really easy. Because if I say, throw a strike, they know exactly what I'm talking about because they use the same terms. Now, outside of the baseball diamond, it's more difficult because they speak Korean and I speak English. So, to go order something in a restaurant was more difficult than being on the diamond. But, they all have the baseball, the American or the English baseball terms that they use every day anyway. So that it was a pretty easy transition. And of course, I had an interpreter there that was well-versed in the game and fluent in both languages. And so he could communicate for me if I needed.
Yeah, it sounds like such a fun, great experience. And I even remember calling you one time. It was like daytime in the U.S. And you picked up. It was about 2 a.m. and I felt terrible.
Yeah, it's on any, depending on daylight savings time, but it's either 16 or 17 hours ahead. So, it's tomorrow there.
Wow.
And so, yeah, it's an interesting dynamic, but it was fun. I enjoyed it a lot.
Well, you're in San Diego now. You're the third base coach, like you said, for the Padres. I mean, that's got to be paradise. I mean, such a great city to work in. Do you walk to work? Do you live real close?
Yeah, this last season I was about a minute and a half walk from my place to the front doors of the clubhouse, and yeah, it's a party every night. The weather's perfect, 70 degrees every day. They pack the stadium every single night. We've got good players. Yeah, fantastic ownership group. The front office is great and working with us, and so yeah, everybody's pushing to get to back to that world championship. We got close this year, but the future looks bright there for sure, and I'm glad to be a part of it. And I get to work with guys like Manny Machado every day. It's pretty fun, and the fans love their team, and guys play hard, and so it's fun to be a part of.
And when Fernando Tatis comes back healthy, who knows what can happen?
Yeah, we didn't have him all year, for one reason or another, but to get to where we got to without him's, a pretty good step in the right direction. So hopefully he's back and his wrist is good and his shoulder is good and he can, be that dynamic guy that hits 40 balls over the fence. and and help us get to the next step. So we're not far away, that's for sure.
And you don't have to answer this one if you don't want to, but are you ever trying to be a manager again, or are you allowed to speak out on that?
Well, right now, if the opportunity arises, I'd certainly think about it. But I'm really enjoying being the position coach. So I'm the infield guy. We've got some dynamic athletes to work with. Being the third base coach is fun. It's stressful at the same time, but it's fun, and I'm really enjoying that. Not to say I wouldn't consider if an opportunity ever came up again, but I'm perfectly happy where I'm at right now, and I get to I get to work with Bob, and that dynamic is great. It's very comfortable, and we think alike. So I'm enjoying that part of it. But if something comes up, I'll certainly take a look at it and see.
I always thought you were going to sneak over to San Francisco before the Giants got Kapler. I was like, I think Matt Williams is coming here. That was my prediction.
It's interesting because they've never, I talked at one point, I was kind of in between, and I talked to Boch a little bit, but at that point he had all of his guys in place, and so it wasn't going to work out anyway. But that was really the only interaction I'd had with the organization with regard to coaching.
Because you got close with the A's, and I was like, man, he needs to get over to the Giants.
Yeah, it just never came about. But you never know. Maybe at some point that might happen. But as of right now, I'm really enjoying my time in San Diego and working with the guys that I work with. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Well, I'll let you go, Matt. But one last thing I just wanted to say that I've always remembered for some reason that I just thought was kind of interesting. You were signing autographs for fans, and someone had commented on how you had a nice signature or something like that. And you said, yeah, my mom always said, if you're going to sign your name, you might as well sign it good. And I just always remembered that.
Yeah, she said, she told me if you sign your name, the person that you're signing for better be able to read it. So I took that to heart. So I try to take time and do it correctly. Make mama proud, that's important to do.
Well, Matt, thanks so much for the time. It really meant a lot to have you on, and can't wait to keep watching you coach, and wish you and the Padres nothing but success here on out.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on, man.
Thanks for the time. Have a good rest of the day.
You got it. Have a good one. See ya.
And there you have it. A lot of fun catching up with the great Matt Williams. I had a great time reflecting on his career and now getting into coaching, so hope you enjoy that as well. And if you haven't already, make sure to give us a follow on Twitter. And if you have any guest suggestions, shoot me an email at jimonbaseshow@gmail.com. And we'll see you on the next one.